The ceremonial chambers of the Hall of Absolute Justice gleamed with an almost painful brilliance. Diplomat Elias Mercer squinted against the metallic sheen that seemed to radiate from every surface. 3 weeks on Veridian and he still hadn't adjusted to their aesthetic preferences, everything polished to reflective perfection, as if imperfections themselves were criminal. Which, in many ways, they were. "The accused will stand," announced Chief Adjudicator Voss, his multi-jointed fingers splaying across the judgment panel. Elias watched as the young woman rose from the defendant's platform. Unlike most Veridians with their iridescent blue skin, hers had a subtle violet undertone that marked her as from the northern provinces. Her name was Tessa Kayvari, and according to the charges, she had shared classified terraforming protocols with off-world entities, a capital offense. "The evidence has been reviewed," Voss continued, his secondary eyelids blinking rapidly, and what Elias had learned was excitement. "The judgment is unanimous. For crimes against planetary security, Tessa Kayvari is sentenced to honorable dissolution." Death, they had sentenced her to death. Elias' translator earpiece buzzed with the formal declaration, but he hardly needed it. He'd spent enough time studying Veridian culture to understand their euphemisms for execution. What struck him most was Tessa's reaction, or lack thereof. She simply bowed her head in acceptance, the traditional gesture of submitting to justice. Not a protest, not a plea, nothing. Later, in his diplomatic quarters, Elias paced furiously. The embassy AI tracked his movements with a subtle camera whir. "Play the security archives again," he commanded. "Tessa Kaivari's movements on the day of the alleged information transfer." The holographic display flickered to life, showing Tessa entering the central archives, then leaving exactly 17 minutes later, not nearly enough time to access and duplicate the classified protocols she was accused of stealing. Cross-reference with shuttle departures to off-world destinations that day. "No departures recorded during the potential window for information handoff," the AI responded. Elias stopped packing, so there's no way she could have passed the information to anyone leaving the planet. He had seen this pattern before on other worlds, convenient scapegoats taking the fall for someone else's actions. The Veridian justice system prided itself on perfect efficiency. Once accused, conviction rates approached 100%. To admit error would undermine their entire societal structure. The execution, honorable dissolution, was scheduled for dawn. Elias had exactly 9 hours to save an innocent woman's life. The Veridian night cycle brought no darkness, only a shift from golden to silver illumination as their binary stars traded places in the sky. Elias moved through the diplomatic quarter with purpose, his formal attire drawing respectful nods from passing Veridians. He reached the small sanctuary garden where he'd arranged to meet his only ally, Kryn, a junior archivist he'd befriended during cultural exchange sessions. "What you're suggesting is incomprehensible," Kryn whispered, his respiratory ridges flaring with stress. "To interfere with justice is to attack the foundation of Veridian society." "It's not justice if she's innocent," Elias countered, "and you've seen the same records I have." Kryn's inner eyelids fluttered. "Even if you're right, the execution chamber is impenetrable. The ceremonial guards." "We'll be expecting a diplomatic observer," Elias finished, producing his official credential chip. "As Earth's representative, I've requested permission to witness the procedure for cultural understanding." Dawn approached with merciless precision. Elias stood among the witnesses in the dissolution chamber, his diplomatic insignia granting him position near the ceremonial platform. Tessa entered, now dressed in the white garments of the condemned, her steps measured and dignified. Chief Adjudicator Voss began the ritual recitation. Elias' hand moved to his pocket, fingers closing around the neural disruptor, technically diplomatic equipment for personal protection, now reprogrammed for a very different purpose. As Tessa was secured to the dissolution apparatus, her eyes met his briefly. Something flickered there, not acceptance as protocol demanded, but the faintest glimmer of desperate hope. It was all the confirmation Elias needed. The moment had come. With practiced smoothness, he activated the disruptor, sending the chamber's systems into momentary chaos. As lights flickered and guards rushed to investigate, Elias moved with decisive speed toward Tessa. "If you want to live," he whispered urgently as he released her restraints, Come with me now. Her violet eyes widened in shock, but she didn't hesitate. Together, they slipped through the emergency exit panel that Kryn had ensured would remain unlocked, into the uncertain promise of escape, and the certainty of becoming the most wanted fugitives on Veridian. The crimson forests of Veridian's outer territories stretched before them, towering vegetation that glowed with bioluminescent veins as the binary suns dipped below the horizon. Elias pulled Tessa deeper into the underbrush as the distant wail of pursuit drones echoed behind them. "They've deployed the sentinels," Tessa whispered, her voice trembling. The violet undertones of her skin had paled to a sickly lavender, whether from fear or exertion Elias couldn't tell. "No one escapes the sentinels." "I'm not from no one," Elias replied, checking the small scanner he'd modified from his diplomatic equipment. "I'm from Earth, and we have a long history of doing impossible things." He flashed her a reassuring smile, though his own heart raced with adrenaline. They had escaped the capital city using maintenance tunnels that Kryn had mapped for them, emerging on the outskirts where the pristine Veridian architecture gave way to wild terrain. The plan had worked flawlessly, almost too flawlessly, which only intensified Elia's suspicion that Tessa's case was more complex than a simple miscarriage of justice. "Why?" Tessa finally asked as they paused by a stream of silvery liquid that wasn't quite water. "Why risk everything for me? Your diplomatic status, your career, your life." Elias dipped a filter into the stream, collecting drinking water while considering his answer. "Because where I come from, we believe innocence matters, and you are innocent." "How can you be so certain?" she challenged. "The evidence doesn't add up. You couldn't have been in two places at once, and there's no record of data transfer during your archive visit." He handed her the filtered water. "Someone set you up." Tessa's secondary eyelids fluttered in what Elias had learned was the Veridian equivalent of holding back tears. "Our system doesn't make mistakes. That's what we're taught from infancy." "Systems don't make mistakes," Elias agreed. "The people who run them do." A piercing screech overhead cut their conversation short. A sentinel drone, sleek and deadly, its scanning beam sweeping the forest floor. Elias pulled Tessa under a large frond, holding his breath as the beam passed inches from their hiding spot. "They're tracking your biological signature," she whispered urgently. "All Veridians are cataloged from birth." Elias reached into his pack, producing a small device. "Biological signature scrambler, standard diplomatic gear for delicate situations." He attached it to her wrist, wincing as it calibrated with a small flash of pain across her skin. "Sorry, human tech isn't designed for Veridian physiology." "You came prepared to commit treason," she observed, not accusingly but with dawning understanding. "I came prepared to uphold justice," he corrected. "Sometimes they're not the same thing." They traveled through the night, the unfamiliar constellations of Veridian's sky guiding their path. Elias had studied the terrain maps extensively, knowing they needed to reach the underground settlement of Nyx, a community of Veridian outcasts who rejected aspects of their society's rigid structure. Dawn brought new challenges. Veridian's countryside wasn't as uninhabited as the map suggested. Small monitoring stations dotted the landscape, forcing them to take circuitous routes that drained their energy and supplies. During a brief rest in a cave-like formation created by massive tree roots, Tessa finally asked the question that had clearly been troubling her. "What happens if we make it? If we escape? I can never return home." Elias paused in his examination of a small wound on his arm, a scratch from their hasty trek through thorny vegetation. "Earth has protocols for political asylum. You'd be protected." "I would be alone, the only Veridian on your world." The vulnerability in her voice made him look up. For all her composure, she was facing the loss of everything familiar, her world, her people, her entire frame of reference. "Not alone," he said softly. "You'd have me for whatever that's worth." Something shifted in her expression, surprise, perhaps even a flicker of warmth. Before she could respond, a distant explosion rocked the ground beneath them. "They're clearing sections of the forest," she explained grimly. "They'll burn the whole territory rather than let a judgment go unenforced." Elias checked his scanner again. "We're close to Nyx's territory, 2 hours, maybe less." The journey to Nyx's hidden entrance proved more challenging than either anticipated. Twice, they nearly stumbled into sentinel patrols. saved only by Tessa's intimate knowledge of Viridian movement patterns. The scrambler kept her biomarkers hidden, but couldn't disguise physical traces, footprints, disturbed vegetation, body heat signatures. When they finally reached the camouflaged entrance, a seemingly solid rock face that responded to specific pressure points, they were exhausted and frayed. Sanctuary seekers, Elias announced to the hidden sensors he knew monitored the entrance. After a tense moment, the rock face rippled like liquid and parted to reveal a narrow passage. They stepped through into dim blue light and found themselves surrounded by a dozen Viridians, their skin showing various non-standard pigmentations, marks of genetic diversity that mainstream Viridian society suppressed. Their leader, a tall figure with striking green-gold skin, stepped forward. "I am Dax. You bring great danger to our doorstep, human diplomat." Their eyes shifted to Tessa. "And you bring one marked for justice." "False justice," Elias stated firmly. "She's innocent, I can prove it." Dax's expression remained impassive. Proof matters little when belief is absolute. The adjudicators will never admit error. "But others might listen," Tessa spoke up, her voice stronger than Elias had yet heard it. "If we can reach the Galactic Embassy on the southern continent." "Impossible," one of Dax's companions interjected. "The airspace is locked down. Ground routes are saturated with sentinels." Elias felt Tessa's hand slip into his, a gesture so unexpected it momentarily distracted him from their dire situation. When he glanced at her, the determination in her eyes reflected his own. "Nothing's impossible," he said, echoing his earlier sentiment. "Not if we work together." That night in the strange, blue-lit underground sanctuary of Nyx, as plans were made and preparations undertaken, Tessa sat beside Elias on a viewing platform that looked out through a cleverly disguised aperture at the stars above. "My whole life I believed in our system," she confessed quietly. "Even when they accused me, I thought, if this is justice, I must accept it." Elias turned to her, studying the complex patterns of her features that he once found alien but now saw as simply beautiful. "What do you believe now?" Her gaze met his, steady and clear. "That sometimes justice needs a human touch." The distance between them seemed suddenly charged with possibility. Two beings from different worlds, thrown together by circumstance, finding in each other something neither expected. Understanding, respect, and the first tender roots of something that might, given time, grow into more. Outside, the sentinels continued their search, but within the sanctuary of Nyx, for this brief moment at least, they were safe, and no longer alone. Dawn broke differently in the underground sanctuary of Nyx, not with the rising of binary suns, but with the subtle shift of bioluminescent lighting designed to mimic natural Viridian daylight. Elias woke to find the community already bustling with activity, preparations for their dangerous journey underway. Dax approached, holding what appeared to be modified environment suits. "These will mask your thermal signatures," they explained, handing the equipment to Elias and Tessa. "Our scouts report increased sentinel activity in all sectors. The entire planetary defense network has been mobilized." "For two fugitives?" Elias questioned, though he already suspected the answer. "Not just any fugitives," Tessa responded, her voice low. "A challenge to the system itself. My escape represents something they cannot tolerate, proof of fallibility." The plan was audacious by necessity. With conventional transportation routes monitored, they would traverse the Crimson Depths, a massive ravine system considered too hazardous for regular patrols. Beneath the surface, ancient tunnels created by extinct Viridian species offered a path to the southern continent where the Galactic Embassy stood. As they made final preparations, Tessa pulled Elias aside into a small alcove away from curious eyes. "If we succeed," she began hesitantly, "if we reach the embassy, what happens between us?" The question caught Elias off guard. In the rush of escape and survival, he hadn't allowed himself to contemplate the future, their future. Yet something undeniable had formed between them, a connection transcending their physiological differences. "I don't know," he admitted honestly, "but I'd like to find out." Her fingers, longer than human digits with their subtle iridescence, intertwined with his. "No one has ever seen me as you do, not as a component of Viridian society, but as myself." The kiss that followed was both foreign and familiar, her skin cooler than a human's, the taste faintly metallic, yet the emotion behind it unmistakable. When they separated, Elias saw her secondary eyelids fluttering rapidly, a sign of deep emotion rarely displayed in Viridian culture. Their moment of intimacy was interrupted as alarms echoed through the sanctuary. "Sentinel breach in the outer defenses," a voice announced. "Evacuation protocol initiated." The journey into the Crimson Depths began in chaos. Dax led a contingent of Nyx defenders to hold off the Sentinels while Elias and Tessa, along with two guides, descended into the ravine. Explosions echoed above them, the sound of sacrifice they could do nothing to prevent. Dax knew the risks, one guide assured them, seeing their distress. "Nyx has endured persecution before. They will scatter and regroup as always." The tunnels beneath the ravine floor were ancient and disorienting, a labyrinth of passages that seemed to shift and breathe. Their guides navigated with confidence until reaching a massive underground chamber where crystalline formations created natural bridges across a chasm of unknown depth. "We part ways here," the senior guide announced. "Follow the phosphorescent markings on the eastern tunnel. They will lead you to the surface near the embassy perimeter." Left alone, Elias and Tessa crossed the crystal bridges with cautious steps. In the ethereal light of the crystal cavern, their environment suits cast prismatic reflections, creating a private light show that momentarily distracted from their perilous situation. "It's beautiful," Tessa whispered, her voice echoing softly. "I never knew this existed beneath our feet. So much of my world has been hidden from me." "That's true for most worlds," Elias replied. "We build societies on selected truths, comfortable narratives." They made camp in a small alcove, their supplies dwindling. The journey had taken longer than anticipated, and exhaustion threatened their progress. In the intimate darkness, with only their suit lights providing illumination, the barriers between them dissolved further. Tessa traced the contours of Elias' face with curious fingers. "Your species seems so fragile, yet you possess such determination. And yours seems so certain of everything, yet you've shown remarkable adaptability," he countered, drawing her closer. Their second kiss deepened into more, an exploration of differences and similarities, discovering how their bodies could communicate what words might fail to express. In the depths of an alien world, they found a moment of connection that transcended their origins, creating something entirely new between them. Morning, or what passed for it in the subterranean environment, brought renewed purpose and the final leg of their journey. The tunnel gradually inclined upward, the air growing warmer and drier. By midday, they could see natural light filtering through cracks in the ceiling. "We're close," Elias confirmed, checking his scanner. "The embassy perimeter should be just beyond that rise." What they found instead was a blockade. Chief Adjudicator Voss himself stood with a contingent of elite guards waiting. "Remarkable persistence," Voss commented coolly, "but ultimately futile." Elias stepped protectively in front of Tessa. "How did you find us?" "Your ally in the archives wasn't as discreet as you believed," Voss replied. "Kryn has already faced justice for his transgression." The news hit them both hard, another life lost in their bid for freedom. "This ends now," Voss continued. "The disruption to our society must be contained." "It's already too late," Elias countered, activating a small device from his pack, the data recorder he'd carried since their escape. "I've documented everything, Tessa's false charges, the corruption in your justice system, the violent suppression of dissenters. The transmission is already broadcasting to the Galactic Council." Voss's secondary eyelids flickered rapidly, the first sign of uncertainty. "Impossible. Our planetary communications grid is secured." "Not against diplomatic override protocols," Elias explained. "Everything that's happened is now part of the official record." A tense standoff ensued, broken by the unexpected arrival of embassy security forces, a mix of species from various Galactic Council worlds, responding to Elias' emergency beacon. What followed was not the violent confrontation they feared, but something more powerful, a public reckoning. The evidence Elias had gathered revealed a pattern of systemic abuses, with Tessa's case merely the most recent example. More significantly, it exposed Voss himself as the architect of numerous false accusations, designed to eliminate political rivals or those who questioned Viridian traditions. In the days that followed, as they received medical treatment and diplomatic protection within the embassy walls, Tessa and Elias watched as Viridian society began a painful process of self-examination. Reform-minded officials, long silenced by fear, found their voices. The perfect system acknowledged its imperfections. 1 month later, standing on the embassy's observation deck as the binary sun set, Tessa turned to Elias with renewed purpose in her eyes. "The provisional government has asked me to help restructure the justice protocols," she said. "They believe my experience provides valuable perspective." Elias smiled, though with a hint of sadness. "They're right. You understand both sides now, the comfort of absolute certainty and the necessity of compassionate doubt." "Will you stay?" she asked directly. "Your diplomatic mission concluded weeks ago." "I've requested an extended assignment," he replied, taking her hand in his. "It seems there's important work to be done here, building bridges between different worlds." As night fell over Viridian, they stood together at the threshold of something new, not just for themselves, but for an entire civilization learning that true justice requires more than rigid adherence to rules. It demands understanding, compassion, and sometimes the courage to defy what everyone accepts as truth. In the soft glow of starlight, their silhouettes merged, different in origin but unified in purpose, an embodiment of the change they had set in motion.